The Arizona Territory, 1,885, a land where mercy was scarce and trust between settlers and Apaches even scarcer. Sarah Holloway never imagined that reaching into deadly quicksand to save a drowning Apache boy would change everything. The child, frozen in terror as the earth slowly consumed him, was no ordinary boy. He was the son of Nahilzay, the most feared Apache war chief in the territory. 2 days after her act of compassion, Sarah awoke to find the imposing figure of Nahilzay at her cabin door, his weathered face unreadable. What happened next defied everything she'd been taught about the savages who roamed these lands. Could an act of simple human kindness truly bridge the bloody chasm between two worlds set on destroying each other? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Dawn broke over Sarah Holloway's modest homestead, golden light spilling across the weathered porch where she sat mending a tear in her muddy boots. 3 years on this patch of Arizona dirt had taught her that good footwear meant survival. She ran her fingers over the caked Muda, reminder of yesterday's desperate plunge into the quicksand to save the Apache boy. Foolish woman, she muttered to herself, though without conviction. At 32, Sarah had long stopped caring what others thought of her actions. The war had taken her husband James, leaving her with nothing but his old journal and a determination to forge a new life, far from Richmond's painful memories. She opened the leather-bound journal, its pages dog-eared from countless readings. James's neat handwriting detailed the territories west of the Mississippi, maps he'd drawn during his scouting days. His final entry, penned before Gettysburg claimed him, read, "The frontier forgives nothing, but rewards courage abundantly." Those words had carried her through the loneliest nights. From her porch, Sarah surveyed her small kingdom, the vegetable garden, the chicken coop, the barn housing her 2 horses and milk cow. Not much by Eastern standards, but it was hers, free and clear. Unlike most women who traveled west, she hadn't remarried. Independence, once tasted, proved too precious to surrender. The town of Copper Springs lay 5 miles south, close enough for necessary trade but far enough to avoid unwanted scrutiny. The townsfolk viewed her with a mixture of respect and suspicion. Her skill with herbs and remedies earned her a reputation as a healer, but her willingness to treat injured Apaches with the same care as settlers had branded her an Indian sympathizer. Marshal Wade Thornton had made his opinions clear enough during her last visit to town. "A woman alone is asking for trouble," he'd said, thumbs hooked in his belt, "especially one who doesn't know where her loyalties should lie." The threat beneath his concern wasn't subtle. Sarah placed her father's old Spencer rifle across her lap as she worked. The weapon represented another boundary. The townsfolk couldn't understand a woman who could shoot as well as most men. Her father, a physician who believed in practical education, had ensured his daughter could defend herself long before such skills became necessary. She glanced toward the eastern ridge where she'd found the boy struggling in the quicksand. The memory remained vivid, his wide, terrified eyes, arms flailing as the earth slowly swallowed him. She hadn't hesitated, wading in despite the danger, using a fallen branch for leverage as she'd been taught by a Shoshone woman years ago. When she finally pulled him free, covered in mud but alive, the boy had looked at her with equal parts gratitude and fear before fleeing into the brush. Not a word spoken between them, yet somehow the encounter felt significant. Sarah reached for the jar of salve on the table beside her, a mixture of her own creation, blending traditional remedies with knowledge gleaned from local tribes. The frontier demanded adaptation, and Sarah had discovered that healing transcended cultural boundaries. Plants didn't care who gathered them, and pain spoke a universal language. A flicker of movement at the tree line caused her to pause, the hairs on her neck rising. Since yesterday's rescue, she'd felt watched. The Apaches were known for their ability to observe, undetected, patient as the mountains themselves. "If you're out there," she called, "you should know I mean no harm." Only the wind answered, rustling through the cottonwoods along the creek. But Sarah knew better than to dismiss her instincts. Something had changed in her small world. She could feel it as surely as the coming change of seasons. She closed James's journal and rose from her chair. Whatever consequences came from saving the boy, she would face them head-on. The Arizona Territory had taught her that survival often hinged on moments of decisive action. Yesterday at the Quicksand had been such a moment. Little did she know how profoundly that simple act of humanity would alter her fate. The knock came at first light, 3 deliberate strikes against her cabin door. Sarah reached for her rifle before approaching, sliding the small viewing panel open with practiced caution. What she saw made her breath catch. A tall Apache warrior standing motionless in the dawn light, his face painted with red ochre streaks, eagle feathers adorning his long black hair. Even without introduction, she recognized Nahilzay, the war chief whose raids had become legendary throughout the territory. Behind him stood the boy she had pulled from the Quicksand, now clean and dressed in fringed buckskin. "I know why you've come," Sarah said, her voice steadier than she felt. She unbolted the door and stepped onto the porch, rifle held loosely at her side, no pointed at them, but ready if needed. Nahilzay regarded her with obsidian eyes that missed nothing. "You saved Takoda," he said in English, more fluent than she expected. "My son would be with the ancestors if not for your hands." The boy Takoda stared at her from behind his father's leg, curiosity battling with ingrained wariness. "Any decent person would have done the same," Sarah replied. A barely perceptible change crossed Nahilzay's stern features. "No, many white eyes would have watched him die." The brutal truth of his words hung between them. Decades of bloodshed had poisoned both sides beyond reason. "I am not those people," she said simply. Nahilzay nodded once. "This I have seen." He removed a small silver pouch from around his neck, an intricately worked medicine bag, adorned with turquoise and stamped silver. "Among my people, a life debt must be honored." "That's not necessary." "It is our way," he interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. "You saved the son of Nahilzay. Now Nahilzay pledges protection to you." He extended the medicine pouch. "Wear this. It tells all Apache that you stand under my protection." Sarah hesitated before accepting the unexpected gift. The leather was worn smooth from years of contact with his skin, the silver warm to her touch. "What does this mean, exactly?" "It means I will guard your life as you guarded his. My eyes will watch your land. No harm will come to you from Apache hands." He gestured toward the distant mountains. "When the white soldiers push us, many young warriors grow angry. They do not always see differences among your people. This will show them you are not enemy." The implications slowly dawned on Sarah. In offering protection, Nahilzay was also admitting the danger his own people might pose to Hera, remarkable concession from a war chief. "Your honesty is unexpected," she said. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "As was your courage, woman, who walks into danger." Takoda suddenly stepped forward, offering a small objector, carved wooden horse, crude but recognizable. "For you," he said softly in halting English, "I make." Sarah knelt to accept the gift, touched by the gesture. "Thank you, Takoda. It's beautiful." The boy retreated quickly behind his father, but his eyes remained fixed on her with unmistakable curiosity. Nahilzay placed his hand on his son's shoulder. "We go now, but we return." He fixed Sarah with a penetrating gaze. "The silver medicine holds powerful protection spirits. Do not remove it." "I understand," Sarah said, slipping the pouch around her neck. The weight of it felt significant, a physical embodiment of this unexpected alliance. As they turned to leave, Sarah called after them, "Nahilzay." When he paused, she added, "My name is Sarah Holloway." He considered this, then nodded once. "Sarah Holloway," he repeated, the syllables careful on his tongue. "You have made an enemy of Quicksand and a friend of Nahilzay. One is more dangerous." With that cryptic statement, he and Takoda vanished into the brush with remarkable silence. Sarah stood on her porch long after they'd disappeared, fingers tracing the intricate patterns of the medicine pouch, wondering what consequences would follow from this strange morning visitation. The main street of Copper Springs bustled with midday activity as Sarah guided her wagon past the livery stable. She'd tucked Nahilzay's medicine pouch beneath her high-collared blouse, visible enough to fulfill her promise to wear it, concealed enough to avoid unwanted questions from townsfolk. Eyes followed her progress down the dusty thoroughfare. 3 years in the territory hadn't erased her status as an outsider. Being a widow who refused remarriage made her an oddity. Her willingness to trade with Apaches made her suspect. Sarah reined her horse to a stop outside Wilson's general store, smoothing her skirts before entering the establishment. The bell above the door announced her arrival, bringing Samuel Wilson's bearded face up from his ledger. "Mrs. Holloway," he greeted warmly, genuine pleasure in his voice. "Been too long since you've graced us with your presence." Samuel was perhaps her only true ally in tone, a former Quaker, with a philosophical bent that allowed him to see beyond the territory's entrenched hatreds. His wife had been saved by Sarah's medicinal knowledge during a difficult childbirth, cementing a friendship that defied local convention. "Supply runs can't be avoided forever, Samuel," she replied, handing him her list, "though I'd delay them longer if I could." He chuckled, scanning her needs. "Town's been lively lately. Army sent another detachment through yesterday. Word is, they're establishing a new outpost up near Black Mesa." Sarah kept her expression neutral, despite the information's significance. Black Mesa lay dangerously close to where she suspected Nahilzay's people camped during summer months. As Samuel gathered her supplies, she noticed a freshly posted broadsheet on his wall. Moving closer, she felt her stomach tighten. A crude rendering of Nahilzay's face stared back at her beneath bold lettering. "Wanted. Apache War Chief Nahilzay. 500 reward." "New bounty," Samuel said quietly, noting her attention. "After that raid on the Miller homestead last month, territorial governor doubled the price on his head." "The Millers were running whiskey to the reservations," Sarah replied, perhaps too sharply. Samuel raised his hands. "Just passing along news, not judgment." He lowered his voice. "Though speaking of judgment, Marshal Thornton's been asking questions about you." "What kind of questions?" "The kind that suggest he's looking for trouble. Mentioned something about smoke signals seen near your property." Samuel's eyes held concern. "You're careful, I know, but these are dangerous times for anyone perceived as sympathetic to the Apache." The store's door swung open, conversation halting as Marshal Thornton himself entered, thumbs hooked in his belt loops, eyes narrowing at the sight of Sarah. "Mrs. Holloway," he drawled, removing his hat with exaggerated courtesy. "Convenient timing. I was planning to ride out to your place tomorrow." "What business brings you to my door, Marshal?" Sarah asked, forcing civility into her tone. "Just keeping peace in my jurisdiction." His gaze wandered to her parcels. "Buying a lot of supplies. Expecting company?" "Just preparing for winter. It comes early in the high country." Thornton nodded, unconvinced. "Funny thing about your place, Mrs. Holloway. Army scouts reported Apache sign all around your property. Yet your livestock remains untouched." He stepped closer. "Makes a man wonder what kind of arrangement you might have." "Perhaps they respect that I've treated their sick when others wouldn't," Sarah replied evenly. "Or perhaps you're providing information, supplies." His voice hardened. "Harboring enemies of territorial peace is a hanging offense, Mrs. Holloway, even for a woman." Samuel intervened. "Your parcels are ready, Sarah. I've added those seeds you wanted." Thornton backed away, replacing his hat. "Just a friendly warning. Strange times make for strange alliances, but some lines can't be crossed without consequences." He turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and there's a town meeting tonight. Army colonels discussing new measures against hostiles. Attendance is strongly encouraged." After he departed, Samuel whispered, "Something's brewing, Sarah. Thornton's never been friendly, but this feels different." Sarah nodded, fingering the hidden medicine pouch. "Yes," she said quietly, "everything feels different now. Lower your body. Become part of Earth." Nahilzay's voice was patient but firm as he demonstrated how to move through tall grass without creating telltale ripples. A week had passed since his first appearance at Sarah's cabin. What began as occasional visits to ensure her safety had evolved into something unexpected: lessons in survival. Sarah attempted to mimic his crouched position, feeling ridiculous yet determined. "I'm not built to slither like a snake," she muttered. "Not snake, deer. Silent, alert." He gestured to nearby tracks. "What animal made these?" Sarah studied the impressions. "Rabbit? Coyote. See the claw marks? Rabbit leaves round prints, no claws showing." He pointed to broken twigs. Animal moved this way, hunting, knew where it was going. These lessons had started after Sarah mentioned Thornton's veiled threats. Nahilzay had simply stated, "You must learn to see what others miss," and the instruction began. Today they worked at the edge of her property, far enough from potential observers, but close enough that Sarah could retreat quickly if riders approached. Takoda accompanied them, watching with solemn attention. "Why teach me these things?" Sarah asked during a rest. Nahilzay considered her question. "Knowledge keeps you alive. You saved my son. Now I save you with knowledge." It wasn't the complete answer, but Sarah had learned that Nahilzay revealed himself gradually, like water slowly filling a basin. Takoda approached with a handful of herbs. "These good for fever?" he asked in his improving English. Sarah examined the plants. "Yes, exactly right. You have a good eye." The boy beamed, a rare, full smile transforming his serious face. Their shared interest in healing had become a bridge between them. Sarah had begun teaching him the English names for medicinal plants, while he showed her Apache preparations she'd never encountered. "Your son has a healer's gift," she told Nahilzay. Something like pride flickered across his face. His mother was same. She could find healing plants others walked past. It was the first mention of Takoda's mother. Sarah treaded carefully. She taught him well. Until Bluecoats came. His voice remained neutral, but his eyes hardened. 5 winters ago, Army said our camp was hostiles hiding from reservation. They were wrong. Women gathering acorns, children playing, soldiers did not stop to see difference. Sarah felt the weight of his words. "I'm sorry." "Sorry does not bring back dead." He met her gaze directly. "But you are not those soldiers, just as I am not warriors who attacked your settlers." This simple acknowledgement, that neither was responsible for the crimes of their people, felt monumental. Later, as shadows lengthened, Takoda presented Sarah with another carved wooden figure, this one, a woman with arms outstretched. "Is this me?" Sarah asked, touched by the gift. He nodded. "You, helping," he pantomimed, pulling someone from Quicksand. "It's beautiful, Takoda. Thank you." She placed it beside the wooden horse on her porch railing. Nahilzay watched this exchange with an unreadable expression. "We go now. Tomorrow I show you how to find water in dry places. Will you stay for supper first?" The invitation surprised even Sarah. Father and son exchanged glances. After a moment, Nahilzay nodded once. "We will eat together." That evening, sharing cornbread and rabbit stew around her table, Sarah realized how profoundly things had changed. Here sat the most feared Apache war chief in the territory, patiently explaining to his son why one must always thank the spirits of animals who provided food. When Takoda fell asleep by the fire, Nahilzay spoke softly. "Your Marshal Thornton, he is dangerous man?" "Increasingly so," Sarah admitted. "He suspects something." Nahilzay's expression darkened. "Be careful, Sarah Holloway. Some men cannot see past their hatred." The use of her name, spoken with genuine concern, stirred something unexpected within her, feeling she hadn't experienced since James died. "I will," she promised, suddenly aware of how complicated their alliance had become. The meadow above Crystal Creek offered Sarah's favorite medicinal plant, Sevening primrose for skin ailments, yarrow for wounds, and wild mint to ease stomach troubles. With autumn approaching, today was her last chance to gather them before winter claimed the high country. She worked methodically, trowel in hand, her basket half filled with carefully selected specimens. Nahilzay's lessons had sharpened her awareness. She now perceived the forest differently, noting bird calls, wind direction, the subtle movements of wildlife. Which was why the sudden silence caught her attention immediately. The woods had gone still. No birdsong, no rustling leaves, just the eerie quiet that meant danger. Sarah straightened slowly, hand moving toward the knife at her belt. Something was wrong. She backed toward a large boulder, scanning the tree line. The morning's lesson on situational awareness echoed in her mind. Know where to run before you need to run. The first gunshot shattered the silence. Bark exploded from a tree beside her as Sarah dove behind the boulder, heart hammering. 2 more shots followed, kicking up dirt near her position. "We know you're out there, Indian lover," a male voice called. "Marshal wants a word with you." Sarah recognized the voice. Jennings, one of Thornton's deputies. She'd treated his daughter's croup last winter. "This is private property," she shouted back. "You're trespassing." Laughter answered her. "Ain't trespassing when we're pursuing suspected Apache sympathizers." "3 men," came a whispered voice beside her. Sarah nearly screamed as Nahilzay materialized at her side, seeming to emerge from the stone itself. He pressed a finger to his lips, eyes intent on the tree line. "How did you?" "Followed you, felt something wrong." He knocked an arrow to his bow. "Stay here." Before she could protest, he vanished into the brush with supernatural silence. "Last chance to come peaceful-like," Jennings called, "or we start shooting again, and our aim might improve." Sarah calculated her options. The men were between her and her horse. Running meant exposing herself to gunfire. Staying meant... A scream cut through the air, followed by a gurgling sound. Then another shout of alarm, abruptly silenced. "Bill? Hank?" Jennings's voice now held fear. "Where are?" The sickening sound of an impact was followed by a heavy thud. Then silence reclaimed the forest. "It's safe now," Nahilzay called softly. Sarah emerged cautiously. 3 bodies lay scattered among the tree still, one moving feebly. Nahilzay stood over the wounded man Jennings with an arrow trained at his heart. "Don't kill him," Sarah said quickly. Nahilzay's expression was coldly efficient. "He tried to kill you. We need information." She knelt beside the wounded deputy, who stared at her with naked terror. An arrow protruded from his thigh, another from his shoulder. "Filthy Apache lover," Jennings spat, though fear undermined his defiance. Sarah examined his wounds with clinical detachment. "These won't kill you if treated properly." "Who sent you?" "You know damn well who." "I want to hear you say it." Jennings grimaced in pain. "Marshall had concerns about your activities. Concerns that justified murder. Just meant to scare you, bring you in." His eyes darted to Nahilzay. "Didn't expect your pet savage to be watching." Nahilzay's bow twitched, but Sarah raised a hand. "Why now? What's changed?" Pain loosened Jennings's tongue. "Mining company men in town last week. Lots of talk with Thornton behind closed doors. Then orders to watch your place, follow you." Sarah and Nahilzay exchanged glances. This was new information. "What mining company?" "Arizona Copper Consolidated. Big money from back east." Jennings coughed. "That's all I know, I swear." Sarah began treating his wounds. "We're taking your weapons and horses. You'll live if the infection doesn't set in." After binding his injuries, they left Jennings propped against a tree, his dead companions nearby. The broken shaft of one of Nahilzay's arrows lay deliberately placed between Thema, warning to those who would find the scene. "Things will get worse now," Nahilzay said as they rode double on Sarah's horse, heading back to her cabin. "Yes," she agreed, the weight of the confrontation settling upon her. "This changes everything." Rain lashed against the cabin windows as Sarah stoked the fire. The ambush had occurred 3 days ago, and the weather had turned as ominous as their situation. Nahilzay sat at her table, examining James's old journal with careful hands, while Takoda slept on a pallet near the hearth. "Your husband drew these maps?" Nahilzay asked, studying the detailed renderings of mountain passes and water sources. "James was a scout before joining the Union Army," Sarah explained, settling across from him. "He had a gift for remembering landscapes." Nahilzay turned a page, then stopped, examining a faded photograph tucked between the leaves. It showed a younger James in uniform, standing beside a Native American man in similar attire. "He worked with Apache scouts?" Genuine surprise colored Nahilzay's voice. Sarah nodded, taking the photograph. James believed cooperation was the only path to peace. His commanding officer thought him naive, but James said the Apache scouts saved his unit more than once. She hadn't viewed the photograph in years. The memories it evoked were still tender. James's passionate letters about finding common ground with people he'd been taught to fear. "This is why you do not fear us," Nahilzay observed. "Your husband taught you differently. He started the lesson. Life finished it." Sarah took a breath. "After Gettysburg, I worked as a nurse. saw men from both sides suffering identically. Pain doesn't care what uniform you wear. She met his gaze directly. Or what color your skin is. A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only by the crackling fire and drumming rain. I had a wife, Nahilzay said suddenly. Kianla. She was like you, stubborn, determined. A rare smile touched his lips. Always arguing with me. What happened to her? Sarah asked gently, though she suspected the answer. Soldiers came at dawn. Women were gathering by the stream. His voice remained level, but his eyes reflected old pain. Kianla tried to help elders escape. Soldiers shot her as she ran. I was hunting. Returned to find. He stopped. I'm sorry, Sarah said, the inadequate words all she could offer. After, I became what they already believed I was, a killer of white men. He looked at his hands. Blood calls for blood. This is our way. And yet you're here, talking with me instead of killing me. Because you showed there is another way. When you saved Takoda, you broke the circle of vengeance. He tapped the journal, like your husband tried to do. The revelation of these parallel histories, James working with Apache scouts, Nahilzay now forming an alliance with her, felt significant, as if their current paths had been set in motion long ago. A thought struck Sarah. The mining company Jennings mentioned, could they want my land? Perhaps, Nahilzay considered. But why involve Thornton? Why not simply offer money? Sarah moved to a trunk in the corner, withdrawing land surveys and legal papers. James chose this property carefully, said it had strategic value, though he never explained what he meant. Together they spread the documents across the table, examining boundaries and geographical features. Here, Nahilzay pointed to a notation in James's handwriting. What does this mean? Copper vein extends north into reservation land. Sarah studied the note, understanding dawning. James suspected there were mineral deposits crossing from my property into Apache territory. If true, this explains much. Mining companies cannot legally take reservation land. But if the Apaches were driven off or relocated due to hostilities, Sarah continued his thought. And if your land were seized from an Apache sympathizer, their eyes met in mutual understanding. Thornton's working for the mining interests, Sarah concluded, using fear of Apache raids to justify seizing land. And blaming Apache for violence they did not commit, Nahilzay added, creating excuses for breaking treaties. We need proof, Sarah said, gathering the papers. Something to take to the territorial governor. Nahilzay nodded. Tomorrow I take you to meet our elders. They must hear this. He studied her face. It will be dangerous. No white woman has entered our sacred mountain. I'll go, Sarah said without hesitation. This concerns all of us now. They traveled by night, avoiding the main trails. Sarah rode her mare while Nahilzay moved on foot, seeming to glide through the darkness. Takoda had been left with Nahilzay's sister at a hidden camp, safer there than accompanying them on this perilous journey. How much farther? Sarah whispered, as they paused at a ridge overlooking a vast canyon. The moonlight painted the landscape in silver and shadow, transforming familiar territory into an alien realm. We reach mountain by dawn, Nahilzay replied, scanning the horizon. Army patrols in valley. We go around. He pointed to a barely visible game trail winding along the canyon's edge. Sarah swallowed her apprehension. The path looked scarcely wide enough for a mountain goat, let alone a horse. I'll walk, she said, dismounting. Less chance of the mare losing her footing. Nahilzay nodded approval. Wise choice. They proceeded in silence, Sarah leading her horse, focusing on each careful step. One misstep meant a fatal plunge into the darkness below. An hour into their trek, Nahilzay suddenly raised his hand, freezing in place. Sarah halted, straining her ears. Then she heard it voices carried on the night breeze, the clink of metal on stone. Army scouts, Nahilzay breathed, drawing her and the horse into a shallow cave formed by an overhanging rock. Do not move. They stood pressed together in the cramped space, Sarah acutely aware of Nahilzay's closeness, his breath warm against her hair. Below, lantern light bobbed as soldiers picked their way along the main trail. Waste of time, one voice drifted up. No Apache would use this route. Orders are orders, another replied. Colonel wants all approaches to Black Mesa monitored. Ever since that mining fella started whispering in his ear. The voices faded as the patrol moved on. Sarah released her breath, only then realizing she'd been holding it. They're increasing patrols, she whispered, looking for your people. Not just my people, Nahilzay replied grimly. They mentioned Black Mesa, that is where we go. As false dawn lightened the eastern sky, they arrived at what appeared to be a solid rock face. Nahilzay led her to a narrow fissure almost invisible, unless one knew exactly where to look. Leave horse here, he instructed. Way is too narrow. Sarah secured her mare with access to water and followed Nahilzay into the crevice. They squeezed through the tight passage that opened suddenly into a hidden valley nestled within the mountain's embrace. Sarah gasped at the sight. A small lake reflected the pink-gold light of dawn. Ancient dwellings were carved into the cliff faces, accessible by ladders and narrow paths. Smoke rose from cooking fires, and children played near the water's edge. It was a complete village, hidden inside the mountain. Welcome to Tsenaga Place of the Ancestors, Nahilzay said, a note of pride in his voice. Few white eyes have seen this place and lived to remember it. People emerged from dwellings, expressions ranging from curiosity to open hostility. Women gathered children close, warriors reached for weapons. You bring outsider to sacred place? An elderly man approached, leaning on a gnarled staff adorned with eagle feathers. His face was deeply lined, eyes sharp beneath white brows. She brings important knowledge, grandfather, Nahilzay answered respectfully. Knowledge that affects our people's future. The old man studied Sarah with penetrating intensity. I am Nahilzay, eldest of council. Why should we trust words of white woman? Before Sarah could respond, commotion erupted from a nearby dwelling. A young woman emerged, supporting an elderly woman who coughed violently, blood speckling her lips. Grandmother weakens, the young woman cried. The medicine does not help. Sarah recognized the symptoms, immediately consumption, advanced and life-threatening. Without thinking, she moved toward the suffering woman. I can help, she said, opening her medicine pouch. I've treated this sickness before. Nahilzay blocked her path. Why would you help us? Sarah met his gaze steadily. Because suffering is suffering, no matter who endures it. A murmur passed through the gathered Apaches. Nahilzay stepped forward. Let her try, grandfather, then we will speak of other matters. Nahilzay considered, then nodded once. Help if you can, then we will decide if we hear your words. Sarah moved forward, aware that her reception among the tribe and perhaps their very survival now depended on her healing skills. Marshal Wade Thornton slammed his fist onto the polished mahogany desk, rattling the crystal decanter of bourbon. Across from him, Harrison Phillips, vice president of Arizona Copper Consolidated, remained unperturbed, calmly sipping his drink. 3 men, Phillips, 3 of my deputies ambushed, 2 dead, 1 barely alive with Apache arrows in him. Thornton's face flushed with anger. Your simple intimidation has stirred up a hornet's nest. Phillips adjusted his gold-rimmed spectacles. Unfortunate, certainly, but inevitable in an operation of this magnitude. His Boston accent seemed deliberately exaggerated in the frontier surroundings of Thornton's office. The woman was always going to be problematic. Problematic? Thornton laughed bitterly. She's harboring the most wanted Apache in the territory. Jennings swears Nahilzay himself attacked them. All the better, Phillips replied, setting down his glass. It confirms what we've been saying. She's an Indian sympathizer, makes seizing her property that much easier. Thornton paced the room. What had begun as a simple arrangement, Tharis, the widow Holloway, until she abandoned her claim, allowing the mining company to acquire the land through default, had evolved into something far more complicated. The governor won't authorize seizure without clear evidence, Thornton argued. Phillips reached into his leather portfolio, extracting a document bearing official seals. Perhaps this will ease your concerns. Thornton snatched the paper, eyes widening as he read. This is a land deed for the Holloway property. He looked up sharply. How did you get this? Let's just say certain territorial clerks are amenable to financial incentives. According to official records, Mrs. Holloway's late husband never properly registered their homestead claim. Phillips smiled thinly. The land has now been legally acquired by Arizona Copper Consolidated. This is forgery, Thornton muttered, though his tone suggested admiration rather than censure. It's business, Phillips corrected, and your cooperation will be handsomely rewarded once operations begin. He leaned forward. The assay reports confirm what we suspected. One of the richest copper deposits in the territory runs directly from the Holloway property into the Apache reservation land. Thornton whistled low. No wonder you're willing to spend so much on bribes. We prefer to call them investments. Phillips refilled his glass. The Army colonel has already agreed to support expanded operations against hostile Apaches, particularly around Black Mesa. All we need is a catalyst, an incident, significant enough to justify military action. What kind of incident? Something tragic, something that will outrage decent citizens. Phillips's eyes hardened. A settler massacre would be ideal, preferably with surviving witnesses to tell the tale. Thornton felt a chill despite the officer's warmth. You're talking about staging an attack, using real people as bait. I'm talking about accelerating the inevitable clash between civilization and savagery. Phillips's voice remained calm, reasonable. These conflicts are occurring already. We're simply ensuring they happen at a time and place that serves our interests. A knock interrupted them. Deputy Collins entered, clutching a telegram. Wire from Fort Defiance, sir. Army reports increased Apache movement near Black Mesa. Colonel requests you deputize additional men to support military operations. Thornton exchanged glances with Phillips, whose satisfied smile confirmed this was no coincidence. There's more. Collins continued. Samuel Wilson was caught sending telegrams to the territorial governor about mining company corruption and fraudulent land seizures. Army officer intercepted them. Phillips's smile vanished. The storekeeper needs to be silenced. Already handled, Collins replied. He's in the jail now, charges of sedition and Apache sympathizing. After Collins departed, Phillips turned to Thornton. We need to accelerate our timeline. The Apache war chief is clearly working with the Holloway woman. Use that fact. How? Stage your massacre at her homestead. Let her be the tragic victim of her misplaced trust in savages. Phillips's voice was dispassionate, as if discussing a business transaction. Two problems solved at once. Thornton stared at the land deed in his hands, sensing he'd crossed a line from which there was no return. And if she's actually in league with them, what if they protect her? Phillips smiled coldly. Then you'll have your justification for bringing the full might of the army down on Black Mesa. Either way, we get what we want. 3 days had transformed Sarah's standing among the Apache. After successfully treating the elder woman's consumption with a poultice of crushed Jimson weed, pine resin, and honey, other tribe members sought her healing skills. The council had listened to her warning about the mining company's interest in their land, though opinions remained divided on how to respond. Sarah stood at the edge of the hidden lake, watching women tan hides while children played nearby. The peaceful scene belied the dangers gathering beyond the mountain. You have won many friends here, Nahilzay said, approaching from behind. Even Nahilzay admits your medicine is strong. Not strong enough to heal generations of mistrust, Sarah replied. Half your council still believes this is an elaborate trap. They have reason for caution. Nahilzay gazed toward where warriors practiced with bows and lances. Many promises from white leaders have turned to dust. Sarah couldn't argue. History had taught the Apache that treaties were temporary inconveniences to be discarded when gold or copper or silver was discovered. A rider brings news, Nahilzay continued. Army patrols increase. Soldiers speak of Apache raids that never happened. Thornton's creating a pretext for military action, Sarah concluded. Just as we suspected. There is more. Your friend Samuel has been arrested, charged with helping Apache. Sarah's stomach clenched. Samuel? But he's never even met. She stopped, understanding dawning. It's because he tried to warn the governor about the mining company. Nahilzay nodded grimly. Warriors want to strike first, attack soldier camp while we have surprise. That's exactly what Thornton wants, Sarah protested. It would justify everything he's told the army about hostile Apaches. Their conversation was interrupted by approaching footsteps. Nahilzay and 3 younger warriors approached, faces set in stern lines. "The council has reached decision," the old man announced. "We cannot wait for white man's justice. Too slow, too corrupt. We must protect our sacred mountain." One of the warriors, Kichi, who had opposed Sarah's presence from the beginning, stepped forward aggressively. "Our scouts report soldiers preparing for war. War chief's woman brings danger to our people. Better to strike now, while we still have strength." Sarah bristled at being called war chief's woman, but recognized the more significant issue. "If you attack first, the army will respond with overwhelming force. They'll hunt down everyone, women, children, elders." "We have fought bluecoats before," Kichi retorted. "Not like this," Sarah insisted. "They're looking for an excuse to move against you in force. Please, give me time to reach the territorial governor, with Samuel's evidence and what we've learned." "Time runs short," Nahilzay interrupted. "Council gives 3 days. If you cannot bring proof by then, we follow Kichi's path of war." After they departed, Nahilzay turned to Sarah. "You must return to town. Find more evidence. I will try to hold warriors back." "Come with me," Sarah urged. "Together we can." "No." His voice was firm. "My place is here, preparing my people, protecting my son." His expression softened slightly. "You have shown great courage, Sarah Holloway. But this burden should not be yours." "It became mine the moment I pulled Takoda from that quicksand," she replied. "Just as it became yours when you vowed to protect me." Something unspoken passed between Thiman, acknowledgement of deeper feelings neither was ready to voice. "I found this in my saddlebag," Sarah said, breaking the tension. She handed him a folded paper. "A letter from a cavalry lieutenant to his commander. Samuel must have slipped it in when I was in town." Nahilzay examined the document. "What does it say?" "It confirms that Colonel Hutchinson is planning a major operation against hostiles near Black Mesa. But look at the date. This was written before any of the alleged Apache raids," Thornton reported. Nahilzay's expression darkened. The decision was already made. "Yes, Thornton and the mining company arranged everything in advance." Sarah took a deep breath. "I need to return to my cabin first. James kept records of mineral surveys. Combined with this letter and Samuel's evidence—" "Too dangerous," Nahilzay interrupted. "Thornton will be watching your land." "It's our only chance for peace," Sarah insisted. "Without proof, the council will choose Warren. That's exactly what our enemies want." Nahilzay studied her face, then nodded once. "I will take you back tonight. But I cannot stay. My people need their war chief now." Sarah understood the painful division of his loyalties. 3 days, she promised. "Give me 3 days to find justice without bloodshed." Copper Springs looked different to Sarah as she approached in the pale light of dawn. What once felt merely unwelcoming now seemed actively hostile, with every shadow potentially concealing an enemy. She'd left her distinctive mare hidden outside town, approaching on foot as Nahilzay had taught her. The previous night, they'd retrieved James's survey documents from her cabin, finding it mercifully unwatched. Nahilzay had reluctantly returned to his people, extracting Sarah's promise to exercise extreme caution. The weight of the silver medicine pouch against her chest offered small comfort. The mining company office occupied what had once been the town's finest homia, 2-story structure, with a columned front porch and large windows. Sarah circled to the rear, relieved to find a partially open window at ground level, likely left ajar in the summer heat. The lock-picking skills Nahilzay had taught her proved unnecessary as she slipped inside, finding herself in a storage room filled with crates and filing cabinets. Voices drifted from beyond the door, an early meeting in progress. Sarah pressed her ear against the wood panel. "Cavalry detachment arrives tomorrow," a cultured voice was saying. "Colonel Hutchinson assures me they'll be ready to move immediately upon confirmation of Apache hostilities." "And if there are no hostilities to confirm?" asked another voice, Thornton's. "There will be," the first voice replied coldly. "That's your department, Marshal. I merely handle the financial arrangements." Sarah recognized an opportunity. While the men were occupied, she could search for documents. Moving silently through the storage room, she examined cabinet labels until finding one marked Land Acquisitions Territory Claims. Inside, she discovered dozens of folders, quickly locating one labeled Holloway Homestead. The contents confirmed her worst fiercer forged deed, transferring her property to Arizona Copper Consolidated, backdated to make it appear that James had never properly registered their claim. Carefully replacing the folder, she continued searching until she found a leather-bound ledger hidden beneath mining surveys. The book contained meticulous records of bribes paid to territorial officials, army officers, and local law enforcement, including substantial sums to Marshal Thornton. Most damning was a detailed plan titled Black Mesa Acquisition Strategy, outlining a systematic campaign to drive Apache from reservation lands through manufactured incidents, allowing the company to claim mineral rights once the land was pacified. Sarah's hands trembled as she realized the scope of the conspiracy. This wasn't merely about her property, it was about stealing an entire Apache homeland through orchestrated violence. The voices grew louder, approaching the storage room. Sarah quickly memorized key details from the ledger, then searched desperately for an exit. The window she'd entered through now seemed impossibly distant. "Check the supply room," someone ordered. "We need those new survey maps." Sarah slid behind a stack of crates as the door opened. A clerk entered, rummaging through papers on a nearby shelf. From her hiding place, Sarah could see his boots mere inches from her position. The man muttered to himself, gathering several rolled maps before turning to leave. As the door closed behind him, Sarah released her breath silently. She waited several minutes before daring to move, then crept back to the window. As she prepared to climb out, a final document caught her eye, a telegram pinned to a corkboard. "Proceed with Holloway operation. Stop stage attack tomorrow night. Stop. Ensure survivors witness Apache involvement. Stop Phillips." Sarah's blood ran cold. They planned to stage an attack at her homestead, likely using their own men, disguised as Apachetan, blame the violence on Nahilzay's people. With trembling fingers, she unpinned the telegram, tucking it into her bodice alongside the other evidence. Her escape through the window was clumsy but successful. Heart-pounding, Sarah hurried through back alleys toward the jailhouse. She needed to see Samuel to warn him and discover what evidence he'd gathered. As she rounded the corner, a patrol of cavalry soldiers rode past, forcing her to duck into a doorway. Their presence confirmed the tightening noose around both her and the Apache. When the patrol passed, Sarah continued toward the jail, only to freeze at a commotion ahead. A crowd had gathered outside the sheriff's office. Above their murmuring, she caught fragments of conversation. Tried to escape. Shot while fleeing. Indian sympathizer got what he deserved. With sinking horror, Sarah realized she was too late. Samuel was dead, another victim of the conspiracy, and now she alone carried the evidence that might prevent bloodshed. She backed away from the crowd, formulating a desperate new plan. She had to reach the territorial governor in Prescott, 60 miles away before Thornton's men discovered her presence in town. The mountain trail to Black Mesa had never seemed longer. Sarah pushed her borrowed horse to its limits, constantly glancing over her shoulder for pursuers. Her escape from Copper Springs had been narrow-slipping past deputies searching the town after discovering the break-in at the mining office. Night was falling as she approached the hidden entrance to Tsanaga. Before she could dismount, a shadow detached from the rocks. "You returned too soon," Nahilzay said, materializing beside her. His expression changed as he noted her exhaustion and fear. "What happened?" "Samuel is dead," Sarah said, her voice cracking, "and they're planning to stage an attack on my homestead tomorrow night. Make it look like your people did it." Nahilzay's face hardened. "Inside, now." The council gathered quickly, faces grave as Sarah presented her evidence, the forged deed, notes about the ledger's contents, and the damning telegram. She described the Black Mesa acquisition strategy in detail, emphasizing the mining company's plan to manufacture conflicts. "They intend to drive you from your land, then claim the copper deposits," she concluded. Samuel died trying to expose this plot. Nahilzay, who had been silently studying the documents, looked up with ancient eyes. "These papers mean nothing to white man's law without your storekeeper to verify. That's why I need to reach the territorial governor in Prescott," Sarah explained. "He's known for being fair-minded, with these documents and my testimony." Kitchi scoffed. Governor is 3 days hard ride. Attack comes tomorrow. We must strike first. That's exactly what they want, Sarah countered. Don't you see? Every drop of blood spilled serves their purpose. The council erupted in heated debate, warriors arguing for immediate action, while elders counseled caution. Through it all, Nahilzay remained silent, his gaze fixed on something only he could see. Finally, he raised his hand, and the chamber quieted. I have led our warriors for 7 winters, he began, his voice measured. Have taken many white scalps, have burned homesteads and ambushed soldiers. He looked around the circle. And what has this brought our people? More soldiers, more deaths. Our territory shrinks like water in summer heat. He turned to Sarah. This woman risked her life to bring truth, shows us enemy's real plan. He lifted his war lancier, 6-foot shaft of polished wood, topped with a cavalry saber blade. I say we fight differently this time. Not with weapons only, but with white man's own laws. Murmurs rippled through the gathering. You trust white man's justice? Kitchi challenged. I trust this woman, Nahilzay replied simply. She has proven her word. The declaration hung in the air, its significance not lost on anyone present. Nahilzay nodded slowly, stroking his chin. The war chief speaks wisdom, but question remains to stop tomorrow's attack while messenger rides to governor. We must protect Sarah's homestead, Nahilzay said. Capture those who come to attack, take them as proof. And if bluecoats come instead, Kitchi demanded. If we are trapped? A risk we must take, Nahilzay answered. I will go myself with 10 warriors. The rest remain to protect our people if we fail. After further discussion, the council grudgingly approved the plan. Warriors would covertly position themselves around Sarah's homestead, while a trusted rider, a young Apache who had worked with the cavalry as a scout, would carry the evidence to Prescott. Later, as preparations continued, Sarah found Nahilzay alone at the lake's edge, staring into the water. Thank you for supporting me, she said softly. I spoke only truth. He continued, gazing at the rippling surface. But truth is a dangerous thing between our peoples. Sarah moved closer. What do you mean? He turned to face her, his usual stoicism softened by something she couldn't quite name. 7 winters I have hated all who look like you, blamed all white eyes for Kianla's death. Was simple, clear. His voice lowered. Then you saved my son, showed different path. Nahilzay, If we survive coming days, he continued, nothing will be same, for your people or mine. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel his breath. Or for us. The unspoken sentiment hung between Themen, impossible connection forged through crisis and shared purpose. What future can there be, Sarah whispered, giving voice to the question that had lingered unasked. I do not know, he admitted, but for first time since Kianla died, I wish to see tomorrow's sun. He touched the silver medicine pouch at her throat. And I wish to see it rise for you. Copper Springs Main Street baked under the midday sun as Sarah rode openly into town. After much debate, she had convinced Nahilzay that a direct confrontation in public view was safer than sneaking around. His warriors were positioned in the surrounding hills, watching through field glasses taken from army scouts over the years. Sometimes the boldest path is safest, Sarah had argued. They won't expect me to walk straight into town after what happened to Samuel. Now, as townspeople stopped to stare at her dusty approach, she prayed her strategy wasn't merely foolish bravado. She dismounted in front of the general store that Samuel had once run, now shuttered with a closed by order of marshal sign nailed to the door. A crowd began to gather, whispers spreading like wildfire. Sarah recognized Faces the blacksmith who'd shoed her horses, the preacher's wife who'd once sought her remedies for rheumatism, farmers who'd traded for her herbs. None met her eyes directly. The jail door opened, and Marshal Thornton emerged, adjusting his gun belt with deliberate slowness. Well, well, he called. The widow Holloway graces us with her presence. His hand rested casually on his holstered revolver. Convenient timing, saves me the trouble of riding out to arrest you. On what charges, Marshal? Sarah replied loudly, ensuring everyone could hear. Harboring hostiles, interfering with territorial law enforcement, and now breaking into private property. Thornton's smile didn't reach his eyes. Samuel Wilson tried to flee justice. Don't make the same mistake." Sarah stood her ground. "Samuel didn't flee. He was murdered because he discovered your arrangement with Arizona Copper Consolidated." A murmur ran through the growing crowd. Thornton's face darkened. "Careful with accusations, Mrs. Holloway, especially when you've been living with Apache savages." "I have evidence of your conspiracy." Sarah raised her voice further. "Forged land deeds, records of bribes, a plan to manufacture Apache attacks to justify stealing their land. Ridiculous claims from an Indian-loving widow who's lost her mind." Thornton scoffed, though Sarah noted a flicker of unease in his eyes. "Is it ridiculous?" Sarah turned to address the townspeople directly. "Ask yourselves, when did these Apache raids begin? Right after the mining company arrived. Ask yourselves why Samuel Wilson, a man respected by everyone, here was silenced." From the corner of her eye, Sarah saw Harrison Phillips emerge from his office, looking alarmed at the public confrontation. "Mrs. Wilson," Sarah called to the storekeeper's widow, who stood among the onlookers. "Did Samuel tell you what he discovered about the territorial records being altered?" Before the woman could respond, Thornton cut in. "That's enough. You're under arrest." "For telling the truth?" Sarah challenged. "For exposing how you and Phillips planned to stage an attack on my homestead tonight and blame the Apache." Phillips pushed forward. "Marshal, arrest this woman immediately. These are slanderous accusations." "Then prove me wrong," Sarah retorted. "Show everyone the telegram you received instructing you to ensure survivors witness Apache involvement. Explain the payments recorded in your ledger." The crowd's mood was shifting, uncertainty replacing hostility as her words took root. "She's lying," Phillips sputtered. "This woman has clearly been corrupted by her savage friends." "Samuel wasn't lying," came a quiet voice. Mrs. Wilson stepped forward, clutching a small book. "This is my husband's journal. He recorded everything he learned about the mining company's plans, the forged deeds, the bribes." Her voice strengthened. "The night before he died, he told me if anything happened to him, I should take this to the governor." Thornton's hand moved to his gun. "Hand that over, Martha. It's evidence in an ongoing investigation." "Don't touch her, Thornton," called the blacksmith, stepping forward with hammer in hand. "I've had my doubts about these raids from the beginning. Apache have never bothered us before the mine started operations." The standoff intensified as more townspeople moved to stand near Sarah and Mrs. Wilson. Phillips whispered urgently to Thornton, who looked increasingly cornered. "There's a cavalry detachment headed to Mrs. Holloway's homestead right now," Thornton announced, trying to regain control. "On reports of Apache gathering there, so unless you want to be charged as accomplices—" "The cavalry is being deceived," Sarah interrupted. "Just as you've all been. The mining company wants Apache land and mine. They're creating a false war to steal it." The sound of approaching horses drew everyone's attention. Instead of Thornton's deputies, however, it was a carriage bearing the territorial seal, accompanied by uniformed riders. "The circuit judge," someone whispered. Sarah felt a surge of hope. She hadn't anticipated this potential ally. As the carriage stopped, Thornton and Phillips exchanged alarmed glances, their carefully constructed plot beginning to unravel in the harsh light of public scrutiny. The territorial judge had listened to Sarah's accusations with grave attention, examining the evidence she and Mrs. Wilson presented. His decision was swift and unexpected. Both Thornton and Phillips would be detained pending investigation, but the more pressing concern was intercepting the cavalry detachment headed toward Sarah's homestead. "If they encounter Apache warriors, blood will flow regardless of the truth," Judge Harmon declared. "We must prevent that confrontation." Now Sarah rode at breakneck speed alongside a small party consisting of the judge's clerk, 2 deputies loyal to the late sheriff, whom Thornton had replaced, and 3 townsmen who had volunteered, including the blacksmith, whose skepticism about the raids had finally found voice. "There are 2 routes to your homestead," Sarah explained as they paused at a fork in the trail. "The main road through Cottonwood Canyon or the high trail over Serpent Ridge." "Which would the cavalry take?" asked the clerk Simmons. "Depends on their guide," Sarah replied. "The canyon is easier for horses but leaves them vulnerable to ambush. Any competent scout would advise the ridge trail." Judge Harmon had remained in town to secure the evidence and prisoners, entrusting his official writ to Simmons a document ordering the cavalry commander to stand down. But paper authority meant nothing if they couldn't deliver it in time. "We should split up," the blacksmith suggested. "Cover both routes." Sarah nodded. "I'll take the ridge trail with Simmons. The rest of you follow the canyon." As they separated, Sarah led Simmons up the steep incline toward the ridge. The narrow path wound treacherously along cliff edges, offering spectacular views but little margin for error. "How did you get involved in all this?" Simmons asked as they rode single file. "Most women would have sold their claim and moved back east after being widowed." Sarah smiled grimly. "Most women haven't nursed soldiers through Gettysburg. After seeing what men can survive, note a little frontier hardship seemed manageable." They rode in silence for a time, pushing their mounts as much as the dangerous trail allowed. "There," Sarah pointed suddenly, "dust cloud in the valley beyond the ridge. That's them moving fast." "Can we intercept?" Simmons asked. "We'll need to cut across Broken Arrow Pass," Sarah replied. "It's risky, but it's our only chance to get ahead of them." The pass was barely a game trail, descending the ridge at a precipitous angle. Sarah dismounted, leading her horse carefully over loose shale. Simmons followed, pale-faced but determined. "You're either the bravest woman I've met or the most foolhardy," he commented, as rocks skittered from beneath his horse's hooves into the chasm below. "My late husband said much the same," Sarah replied, managing a tense smile. They had nearly reached the valley floor when Sarah's horse stepped on an unstable section of trail. The ground gave way beneath it, sending the animal scrambling for purchase. Sarah yanked the reins, pulling it back from the edge, but the horse stumbled, throwing her against a boulder. Pain lanced through her ankle as she fell. She tried to stand, only to collapse with a gasp. "It's broken," she groaned, probing the rapidly swelling joint. Simmons dismounted quickly. "We have to turn back." "No time," Sarah insisted. "Take the writ. Follow this valley north. You'll intercept the cavalry before they reach my homestead." "I can't leave you here." "You must." She pulled herself to a sitting position against the boulder. "I'll be fine. Nahilzay has scouts watching these trails. They'll find me." Simmons hesitated, torn between his mission and abandoning an injured woman in the wilderness. "Go," Sarah urged. "Every minute counts." Finally, he nodded, handing her his canteen and spare pistol before remounting. "I'll send help back as soon as I can." As his figure disappeared around the bend, Sarah closed her eyes briefly against the pain. When she opened them, she noticed a glint of metal, half buried in the disturbed soil of the trailer cavalry bugle, likely lost by a military messenger using this same shortcut. She dug it from the dirt, an idea forming. According to Nahilzay, Apache warriors monitored the territory using an elaborate system of lookouts and runners. If she could signal them, taking a deep breath, Sarah raised the bugle to her lips. James had taught her a few calls during the war, not skillfully, but perhaps well enough. The distress signal echoed across the valley, bouncing off canyon walls. She repeated it 3 times, then waited, scanning the ridgelines for movement. Minutes passed. Pain throbbed in her ankle, and doubt crept into her mind. Had anyone heard? Or had she just alerted potential enemies to her vulnerable position? A shadow fell across her. Sarah looked up, reaching for the pistol, then relaxed. "Nahilzay sent me," said Takoda, appearing as silently as his father would have. "He heard your signal." First light painted the eastern sky as Sarah limped toward her homestead, supported by Takoda on one side and a crudely fashioned crutch on the other. The boy had proven remarkably resourceful, splinting her ankle with strips of rawhide and branches before helping her onto his pony for the journey back. Nahilzay had positioned his warriors in a defensive perimeter around Sarah's property, concealed in the brush and rocky outcroppings. As she approached, he emerged from the shadows, relief briefly softening his stoic expression before he noted her injury. "What happened?" he demanded, moving to support her weight from Takoda. "Fell on the ridge trail," Sarah explained between painful steps. "Simmons continued to intercept the cavalry with Judge Harmon's writ." "He is too late," Nahilzay replied grimly. Bluecoats approached from south, many soldiers moving fast. Sarah's heart sank. "How many?" "Full company." Maybe 50 men. He guided her toward the cabin. My warriors are 20. Good position, but he left the odds unspoken. Inside, Sarah found her home transformed into a war council. Apache scouts reported on cavalry movements while warriors prepared weapons. The atmosphere was tense but disciplined. "We need a white flag," Sarah announced. "Something to signal we want to parley." An older warrior scoffed. "Bluecoats shoot first, talk later." "Not if they see me a white woman with the flag," Sarah countered. "It will make them hesitate." Nahilzay frowned. "Too dangerous. Your ankle will hurt just the same whether I'm sitting here or standing on my porch," she finished for him. "This may be our only chance to prevent bloodshed." Before further objections could be raised, a young scout burst in. "Riders coming, not soldier civilians from town." Through the window, Sarah recognized the blacksmith leading several townspeople up the trail, including Mrs. Wilson and, to her surprise, Judge Harmon himself. "They bring papers," the scout reported, "and a box with clicking sound." A telegraph operator, Sarah realized. They must have contacted the territorial capital. Hope flickered as the judge's party arrived, but it was quickly tempered by the sound of approaching hoofbeats from the opposite direction. The cavalry had arrived. What followed was chaos barely contained. Colonel Hutchinson, commanding the cavalry detachment, was outraged to find Judge Harmon at what he'd been told was a gathering of hostile Apaches. The judge, in turn, presented evidence of the mining company's conspiracy, including the forged land deeds and telegram ordering the staged attack. "These allegations require investigation," Hutchinson acknowledged stiffly, "but my orders regarding hostile Apache remain in effect." "There are no hostiles here," Sarah insisted, gesturing to where Nahilzay stood proudly at the edge of the clearing, warriors visible behind him. "Only people defending their land from theft." The standoff might have ended there in uneasy truce while higher authorities were consulted, had Marshal Thornton not appeared suddenly at the edge of the woods, having escaped custody during transport to Prescott. "It's a trap," he shouted, firing his revolver into the air. "The Apache are attacking." The shot triggered an instinctive reaction from nervous troopers. A young cavalryman discharged his carbine, the bullet splintering wood near where Takoda stood. Nahilzay's warriors knocked arrows in response. Colonel Hutchinson bellowed orders for his men to hold fire, but in the confusion, more shots were exchanged. Sarah, desperate to prevent the bloodbath, grabbed a white bedsheet from her porch and hobbled into the space between the two forces, waving it frantically. "Stop!" she screamed. "This is exactly what they want." A bullet whizzed past her ear. Another tore through the sheet. She stood her ground, even as Judge Harmon called for her to take cover. Then Nahilzay was beside her, war lance lowered, standing tall as he addressed the cavalry commander. "If you want war, we will give you war," he called in clear English, "but know you fight for thieves, not justice." His presence beside Sarah, supporting the white flag rather than attacking, created a powerful image that gave even the most battle-hardened troopers pause. Colonel Hutchinson raised his hand, ordering his men to cease fire. In the sudden silence, the telegraph operator stepped forward. "Sir, I have a response from the governor," he announced, holding out a yellow paper. "Priority message." As Hutchinson read, his expression shifted from skepticism to grim understanding. He looked up, eyes moving between Sarah, Nahilzay, and the tense faces of his troops. "Stand down," he ordered finally. "All units stand down." Nahilzay signaled his warriors to lower their weapons, though they remained watchful. "The governor," Hutchinson continued, "has ordered an immediate investigation into Arizona Copper Consolidated and the alleged conspiracy." He turned to Thornton, who was attempting to slip away. "Sergeant, detain that man." The cavalry sergeant had barely taken 2 steps toward Thornton when the marshal drew his second revolver, firing wildly. The shot caught the sergeant in the shoulder, spinning him around. "Nobody's taking me in," Thornton shouted, backing toward the tree line. His eyes darted frantically, the desperation of a cornered animal evident in his face. Colonel Hutchinson drew his sidearm. "Surrender, Thornton. It's over." "It's not over," Thornton snarled. "Not while I've got leverage." Before anyone could react, he lunged sideways, grabbing Takoda, who had edged too close during the confrontation. Holding the boy in front of him as a shield, Thornton pressed his revolver to the child's temple. "Everybody back off," he demanded, "or the little savage gets it." Sarah felt Nahilzay tense beside her, hand tightening on his war lance. "Don't," she whispered. "He'll kill Takoda if you move." "Smart woman," Thornton called, noting their exchange. "Now here's what's going to happen. I'm leaving with the boy. Anyone follows, he dies." Nahilzay spoke softly in Apache. Takoda remained perfectly still, his eyes revealing fear but also trust in his father. "The boy has nothing to do with this," Judge Harmon said, stepping forward cautiously. "This is between you and the law, Thornton." "Law?" Thornton laughed bitterly. "The law is whatever men with power say it is. Always has been." He began backing away, dragging Takoda with him. "I'm heading for the old Diablo mine. Anyone follows before sundown, I'll leave pieces of the boy along the trail." Sarah watched helplessly as Thornton disappeared into the woods with Takoda. The moment they were out of sight, Nahilzay turned to his warriors, issuing rapid instructions in Apache. They melted into the forest in different directions. "What are you doing?" Colonel Hutchinson demanded. "He said no pursuit." "They will not be seen," Nahilzay replied. "We'll track, not attack." Sarah grabbed his arm. "I'm coming with you." "Your ankle is my problem," she finished firmly. "He has Takoda because of me. I'm coming." The abandoned Diablo mine lay 3 miles west, a played-out silver operation notorious for unstable tunnels. Sarah rode double with Nahilzay, following a winding path through dense brush that concealed their approach. Twice they passed Apache scouts, who signed information about Thornton's movements. "He takes Takoda into mine," Nahilzay translated grimly. "Deep inside." They dismounted a quarter-mile from the mine entrance, approaching on foot despite Sarah's painful limp. At the mine's weathered timber entrance, 2 warriors were already waiting. "Thornton knows old tunnels," one reported. "Takes boy down main shaft, then east branch." "Those tunnels are dangerously unstable," Sarah warned. "The support timbers have been rotting for years." Nahilzay nodded. "He chooses good defensive position, bad place to attack." "Then we don't attack," Sarah said. "We negotiate. He will not honor any terms." "I know," Sarah met his gaze, "but negotiation gives us time to position your warriors, and I have an idea." She opened her medicine pouch, extracting several packets of herbs. These Jimson weed and puffball mushroom mixtures, when burned, they produce a smoke that causes disorientation and confusion. Nahilzay's eyes widened slightly. "Medicine smoke. I use it as a last resort for patients with severe pain," Sarah explained, "but breathe too much. The mind wanders." Nahilzay finished. "Good medicine. Good weapon." They developed their strategy quickly. Sarah would enter as negotiator, while warriors positioned themselves at secondary entrances and air shafts. When opportunity arose, they would introduce the smoke. At the mine entrance, Sarah called out, "Marshal Thornton, it's Sarah Holloway. I've come to talk terms." "Send her in alone," Thornton's voice echoed from the darkness. "Any sign of Apache, the boy dies." Sarah lit a lantern and entered the mine shaft, moving carefully on her injured ankle. The main tunnel extended 50 yards before opening into a larger chamber where several passages branched off. Thornton stood at the far side, Takoda still held firmly with a gun to his head. "That's far enough," Thornton ordered as she approached. His once immaculate uniform was filthy, his face streaked with dirt and sweat. "What terms could you possibly offer me?" "Escape," Sarah replied steadily. "Judge Harmon is reasonable. Testify against Phillips and the mining company, and he'll recommend leniency." Thornton laughed harshly. "Leniency? I killed a man, Mrs. Holloway. Samuel Wilson wasn't the first either." "Then why not add a woman and child to your list?" Sarah took another step. "What do you gain by hurting Takoda?" "Time," Thornton answered, "and satisfaction. These savages have taken everything from me authority. My future." His grip tightened on Takoda, who winced. "Seems fitting I take something precious from them." Sarah noticed Takoda's eyes flick upward toward a narrow fissure in the rock ceiling, one of the air shafts they'd identified. She needed to keep Thornton talking while Nahilzay's warriors positioned the medicine smoke. The territorial governor's arrival in Copper Springs transformed the small mining town. Streets were hastily swept, buildings repainted, and a formal reception organized in the courthouse, the same building where, 2 weeks earlier, Judge Harmon had conducted preliminary hearings on the mining conspiracy. Sarah sat near the back, her splinted ankle propped on a cushioned stool. The events at the Diablo mine seemed distant now, though they had occurred just 12 days ago. Thornton's desperate gambit had ended when the medicinal smoke filtered through the air shaft had disoriented him long enough for Takoda to break free. In his confusion, Thornton had fired wildly, triggering a cave-in that nearly trapped them all. Only Nahilzay's quick action had saved them, the war chief pulling both Sarah and his son to safety as the unstable tunnel collapsed, burying Marshal Thornton beneath tons of rock and earth. The evidence presented in this matter is most disturbing. Governor Fremont intoned from his position at the judge's bench. Conspiracy, fraud, corruption of public officials, these strike at the very foundation of territorial governance. The results of the investigation had exceeded even Sarah's hopes. Harrison Phillips had turned state's evidence, revealing a network of bribes and illegal arrangements that stretched from Copper Springs to Phoenix and beyond. Arizona Copper Consolidated's directors now faced federal charges. More significantly for Nahilzay's people, the governor had suspended all mining operations on or adjacent to reservation lands, pending a comprehensive review of territorial treaties. As to the matter of the Apache reservation boundaries, Fremont continued, having reviewed the original treaty of 1876, I find clear evidence that subsequent modifications were executed without proper authority or tribal consent. Sarah glanced to where Nahilzay sat with Nahilzay and other tribal elders, an unprecedented gathering of Apache leaders in a white settlement. Their faces remained impassive, though Sarah had learned to read the subtle signs of Nahilzay's reactions, the slight inclination of his head indicating cautious approval. Therefore, the governor declared, I hereby order the restoration of the original reservation boundaries as established in the 1876 treaty, including the contested areas around Black Mesa and Crystal Creek. A murmur ran through the courtroom. This decision would return significant lands to Apache control, including areas now known to contain valuable mineral deposits. Additionally, Fremont continued, raising his voice over the whispers, I propose the establishment of a trading post at the Holloway homestead to serve as a neutral ground for commerce between settlers and the Apache Nation. Sarah straightened in surprise. This had not been part of the discussions. Mrs. Holloway's actions in exposing this conspiracy at great personal risk demonstrate the possibility of cooperation rather than conflict, the governor explained. The proposed trading post would operate under joint supervision of territorial representatives and tribal elders. The formal proceedings concluded with the signing of documents by both government officials and Apache leaders. As the crowd dispersed, Sarah found herself approached by the governor himself. A remarkable outcome, Mrs. Holloway, he said, offering his hand. Your late husband would be proud of your courage. Thank you, Governor, but I wasn't alone, Sarah replied, glancing toward Nahilzay, who stood across the room deep in conversation with Judge Harmon. Indeed not, Fremont acknowledged, following her gaze. Your alliance with Chief Nahilzay has raised eyebrows, but I'm a practical man. Peace between settlers and Apache would be worth a few ruffled sensibilities. His perceptive comment brought warmth to Sarah's cheeks. Our primary concern is justice for his people. Of course, the governor replied with a knowing smile. The trading post will provide an official framework for continued cooperation. I trust you find the arrangement acceptable? After Fremont moved on, Nahilzay approached, his ceremonial peace pipe in hand, the first time he had carried it publicly among whites. Governor has good heart, he observed, rare among your leaders. He's a politician, Sarah replied. He recognizes the value of peace on the frontier, especially with Washington scrutinizing territorial affairs. You are becoming wise to white man's ways, Nahilzay said, a hint of amusement in his voice. "And you to ours," she countered, nodding toward where Takoda chatted animatedly with the blacksmith Sontu boys, who weeks ago would have been mortal enemies. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the mingling of communities that had lived separately for generations. "What happens now?" Sarah finally asked. "Now we build," Nahilzay replied simply. "Trading post, trust, future." He touched the silver medicine pouch she still wore. "Together." "It won't be easy," she warned. "There will be resistance on both sides." "Easy path rarely worth taking," he said, his hand briefly touching her gesture, invisible to others but significant between them. "Hard trail leads to best views." As they walked from the courthouse into the sunlit street, Sarah realized that the quicksand that had once threatened to swallow Takoda had instead become the foundation for something unprecedented, a bridge between worlds that had seemed forever divided. Autumn painted the Arizona highlands in gold and crimson as Sarah stood on the newly expanded porch of what was now called Holloway Trading Post. 6 months had transformed her modest homestead into a thriving center of commerce and diplomacy. The grand opening celebration had drawn people from both worlds, settlers from as far as Prescott mingled with Apache families who cautiously brought crafts and herbs to trade. Children who once would have been taught to fear each other now played together in the yard, while army officers conversed respectfully with tribal elders. "Your vision becomes real," Nahilzay said, joining her at the railing. He wore a blend of traditional Apache garments and settler clothing, buckskin leggings, paired with a white cotton shirt, his hair still adorned with a single eagle feather denoting his status. "Our vision," Sarah corrected, watching as Takoda demonstrated his English reading skills to impressed onlookers. The boy had flourished in the month since his ordeal, appointed by Nahilzay as a formal bridge walker between cultures. Many challenges had tested their fragile alliance. Mining interests continued to pressure territorial officials. Some settlers refused to trade with savages, while certain young Apache warriors questioned Nahilzay's leadership. Yet day by day, small victories accumulated, fair trades completed, medical knowledge exchanged, friendships cautiously formed. Judge Harmon approached, nodding respectfully to Nahilzay before addressing Sarah. "Governor Fremont sends his regards. The reports of your success here have reached Washington. There's talk of using this model elsewhere in the territories." "Success is measured in generations, not months," Sarah replied. "But we've made a beginning." As the judge moved on, Sarah noticed Mrs. Wilson deep in conversation with an Apache woman, exchanging weaving techniques. The storekeeper's widow had become an unexpected ally, reopening Samuel's store with a new policy of serving all customers, regardless of heritage. "It is time," Nahilzay said quietly. Sarah felt a flutter of nervousness. They had planned this moment carefully, aware of its significance not just for them but for the communities they represented. The ceremony took place as the sun began its descent, painting the landscape in warm amber light. Judge Harmon presided, while Nahilzay represented Apache tradition. Together, they conducted a ritual unlike any previously witnessed in the territorial marriage ceremony that honored both cultures. Sarah wore a simple white dress adorned with beadwork created by Nahilzay's sister. Nahilzay stood tall in his finest ceremonial attire, the respect in his eyes when he looked at Sarah transcending any language barrier. The wedding blanket, woven with symbols from both their traditions, was wrapped around their shoulders as they spoke vows in English and Apache. Some guests appeared uncomfortable with this unprecedented union, but many more watched with hopeful curiosity. Takoda presented them with carved wooden figures representing their family, the final pieces of the set he had begun crafting the day Sarah pulled him from the quicksand. His shy smile as Sarah embraced him conveyed what words could not: acceptance of her, not as a replacement for his birth mother, but as a new form of family forged through shared adversity. As twilight deepened, fires were lit, and music began, fiddles and drums, finding tentative harmony just as their peoples were attempting. Sarah and Nahilzay moved among their guests, embodying the connection they hoped to nurture between communities. "They said it couldn't be done," the blacksmith commented, watching Apache children teaching his son a traditional game. "A year ago, I'd have agreed with them." "Small steps," Sarah replied. "One person at a time. Later, as celebrations continued, Sarah and Nahilzay stood at the edge of her property, their property overlooking the valley where they had first encountered each other. "When I pulled Takoda from the quicksand, I never imagined this outcome," Sarah said softly. "The river does not know where it will lead when it begins its journey," Nahilzay replied, his arm around her waist, "but it finds its path." Sarah rested her head against his shoulder, contemplating the futures that had been avoided: war between their peoples, destruction of the Apache way of life, her own isolation or death. Instead, an act of simple humanity had cascaded into something transformative. "There will be difficult days ahead," she acknowledged. "Yes," Nahilzay agreed, "but we face them together, not just us, but all who choose a different path from hatred." As they turned back toward the lights of the trading post, where two worlds continued their careful dance of coexistence, Sarah was reminded of James's final journal entry. "The frontier forgives nothing, but rewards courage abundantly." In saving a child, she had found a future she could never have imagined, and perhaps helped create one for the frontier itself.